Welcome to the Behind the Wind podcast. I'm Jake Martin. For over 50 years, the LSI team has been dedicated to the science of business development. We have seen the impact of our work and how it's evolved into economic development and now social impact. This week, Sean meets with Congresswoman Celeste Maloy. They talk about Celeste's journey from small town roots to being elected to represent Utah's 2nd Congressional District and generating big results for Utah families and small businesses. Let's dive in.
Well, I really appreciate, I know how busy you are and that you've got back-to-back meetings. I really appreciate you carving out some time to talk with me this morning and
I'm happy to.
Have this discussion. And I've really been looking forward to this for some time and had talked about this with a lot of our mutual friends.
We have a lot of mutual friends. I hear your name a lot.
We have a lot of mutual friends. I mean, including your former boss, who I think so much about, and he said, you really will enjoy working together, and so I really appreciate you spending a few minutes and talking with me this afternoon for you. And just to start off, maybe you could talk about your history and where you grew up, and I think that will set the foundation for some of the things I'd like to talk to you about.
Okay. Well, I grew up in a little tiny town in Nevada. I think everybody knows that now. I've talked about it a lot. It's called Hico. I think it has a population of about 100 people, or it did when I was growing up. I think it's a little smaller now. And it's hard to overstate the impact that has on everything I do. That's the environment that shaped me. And, I grew up surrounded by public land. I grew up with people who depend on natural resources to make a living. And I grew up in an environment where we all knew our neighbors. We knew everybody and everything about everybody in our little world. And I'm in a pretty big world now, but I think those same small world concepts apply even to what I'm doing now. When you grow up in a small town, you learn that you're just going to have to be nice to people because you're going to keep seeing them. There are no people who come and go from your life.
That's exactly right.
Oddly, I've kind of had the same experience in my adult life. People keep coming back, and it's just a good practice to learn to be good to the people around you and learn from them because they're going to keep coming back.
I love that. So you grew up in this small town in Nevada and then came to Utah for school?
Yeah, so I went with my little Nevada high school to Cedar City for the Utah State FFA contest. And I competed in soil judging and range judging. And I won the soil judging contest. I actually tied with my best friend from high school. We won the soil judging contest. And then one of the professors at SUU, so whoever wins this contest gets a full ride scholarship to SUU as long as they major in agriculture. And one of the professors was just great and looked at our transcripts and our scores and said, we can't choose one of these two to give the scholarship to. So he went and got a business to double it so that we could both go to SUU on this scholarship.
Oh my goodness. How do you judge soil? I don't even know what that, I've never heard of this. And what does that mean?
Well, if I taught you, then everyone would be good at it. So I'll just, what they do is take a backhoe and dig a big hole in the ground. And then a bunch of kids in blue jackets file in there. And you have a form you have to fill out. And you figure out what the different soil layers are. That's why they have to have the big holes so you can see the layers of the soil. And you get your hands dirty. You get water and soil in your hand and feel the soil and figure out what texture each layer is. And then you do some evaluations. Would it be good for growing these crops? Is it well drained? Does it flood easily? It's been 20 years since I've done any soil judging.
I didn't even know that was a science. That is incredible. So you end up at Southern Utah University in
Sure.
Cedar City, and which I think that campus is a secret of Utah that is so special, and what an amazing university that is. For people that are not familiar with Southern Utah University, it is in one of the most beautiful areas of Utah, and the access to the Cedar Breaks area and Brian
Yeah.
Head is just incredible. And
Yeah. I agree. That's
so,
why I live there.
and you studied what at the university there?
Agriculture. So I have a bachelor's degree in plant science, an associate's degree in animal science, and a certificate in farm and ranch management.
And did you think you were going to pursue a career in farming and ranching? Did you think you were going back to Nevada to your family's ranch or no?
No, one thing you know when you grow up in a town the size of the town I grew up in is that you're not going back. Um, there was there's no way to make a living there. So I knew I needed to go to college. I knew I had to be able to get a job where I could support myself. Moving home was not an option. And I wish I could say I had a plan when I was 18, but I really didn't know where any of this was headed. I knew I needed to go to college and I knew I needed to pay for it myself. So when I got this scholarship, it made it easy to decide where to go, what to major in, and how to pay for it. And then I just figured the rest of it out as I went. And I talked to young people a lot, even before I ran for Congress. And I always tell them, just stay open to new
That's
career
right.
paths because you don't even know what most of the options are out there right now. I never could have guessed any of the jobs I've done as an adult when I was an 18-year-old freshman in college. I just
Inc-
didn't know these options existed.
And probably including your current job, right?
Yeah, I think I was vaguely aware there was such a thing as Congress, but I definitely never thought I would be part of it.
And I feel that same way too, that for the last 30 years, I've been on a path that I've been going down that I really had not planned on, but have loved it. And it's been amazing. And I think that's such great advice for individuals that are searching for what is their meaning, where are they going to make a difference and dedicate a career, is that be open to some other things, because you might find, even though this isn't your path, that you're going to end up in Congress one day.
Yeah, things things take turns you would never expect. And so people would ask me all the time, "What's your 5-year plan?" I've never had a 5-year plan. There has been no point in my adult life where if I'd have guessed where I was going to be in 5 years, I would have gotten it right.
I
Um, and
sort of feel that
and
way
that's
too.
okay. It's okay to sort of take the opportunities as they come and stay open to them. And I think there's a lot of pressure for young people to know what they're going to do. So I'm always reassuring them that you've got to keep working, you've got to keep moving ahead, but it's okay to not know what the next step is.
I totally agree. So, okay, but law school, that wasn't in part of your plan, or how did that happen?
No, that kind of happened gradually. So I graduated from SUU and the last 2 years I was a student, I was working as an intern with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So I was working with farmers and ranchers. I was using that ag background and that ag degree. And when I graduated, they offered me a full-time job in Beaver. So I moved 50 miles up the freeway to Beaver. And I went from being a student with a full-time job and roommates and a full class schedule to just having a full-time job. And that's where I kind of learned how to be an adult. I was in a small town, but it wasn't my small town. And I grew up a lot in Beaver. And I really liked working with farmers and ranchers. But I was there for almost 10 years. And in that time, I started to realize I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to do something to help change policy. I spent a lot of time talking to people about natural resources policy and about the law, but there wasn't anything I could do to change the stuff that didn't make sense. And I just kept having to explain it to people. So I started applying for law school, but I didn't know if I would get in. I'd been out of school for almost a decade. So I quietly started applying for law school and didn't really tell anyone. And I applied to 42 schools all over the country and ended up at
Goodness.
BYU.
Oh my goodness. And this really was as a result of working with these farmers and ranchers, and that you saw that so much of their livelihood is contingent upon policy, and that you thought this. So going into law school, that you had this idea that you really wanted to pursue policy around some kind of agriculture, but land management, particularly with the ranchers and farmers in rural America?
Kind of. I mean, you start law school, and the first thing they tell you is, you're probably not going to be able to just do what you want right out of law school. You're going to have to
Yeah.
pay your dues. You're going to have to put in your time. And you get there, and you're surrounded by these really bright people, really bright, ambitious people. And they all have these goals, and they start talking about what they're going to do. And I really didn't know what I was going to do. I decided to go to law school because I wanted to get into a position to change things, but I didn't really know how I was going to be able to change things. And then when you start studying the law, you're finding out about law firms and prosecutors and defense attorneys and all these different paths, but nobody ever really sits you down and lines out like, here's what you want out of life and here's how to do it. Mostly they're telling you, you're probably not going to be able to do exactly what you want. So I just, again, sort of went with the flow. I took the classes that interested me. I tried to get internships that were related to my strengths since I already had a strong background in natural resources. And when I graduated, I didn't have a job yet, and I didn't really know where any of this was headed, but I landed in the perfect position for me and my skill set. And even then, it didn't look like it. So I went to work for the Washington County Attorney's Office. I got that job between graduation and when I took the bar exam. So when I graduated, I really didn't know what I was going to do. I'd been trying to get water law jobs and I hadn't found one. And it was discouraging. It's easy to look back on your own story and think that it was all sort of inevitable. It definitely was not. And when the county attorney's office offered me a job, it was just a 1-year position to help them write a natural resources plan. And so it gave me a year to go prove my mettle as an attorney and, try to find a job. And I ended up working on a Bureau of Land Management plan that resulted in a congressional hearing that got me involved in policy in a way that a brand new attorney could not plan to get involved in policy. I couldn't recreate my own career path. I was just in the right place at the right time with the right skill set.
That's amazing. And to have that kind of exposure right out of law school is so unique and really special. That's an incredible story. So did you at that time think, okay, this is where the epicenter of policy is. I need to be in DC. How did you end up working for Congressman Stewart?
Well, when I was working for Washington County, I did a lot of public lands work. And because public lands are federally managed, a lot of it is federal work. I didn't even know that was my first exposure to sort of congressional staffers. I didn't even know that was a job. If you had asked me before that how many staffers a congressman had, I'd have probably said 2. I just didn't, it never occurred to me how many people it took to keep one of these offices running and to do all the work that has to be done.
Exactly.
So I started meeting staffers and chiefs of staff and working with them on policy and sending them, emails of things that were happening in Washington County that we needed the federal delegation's help with. And I also went to work part-time for the Utah Association of Counties doing public lands policy for them. So between those 2 jobs, I was spending a lot of time working with the federal delegation. And that's when I realized that there were people in Congress who were doing this kind of work. And after a few years of working with the congressman's office, then he had an opening. He needed an attorney. He needed somebody to do natural resources. And I happened to be both. So he called me and offered me a job. And it was something that I didn't think I would ever have an opportunity to do. But by then I did know a lot of staffers who work in Washington, D.C. on Utah issues.
So you'd spent most of your adult life, childhood and adult life in rural Utah. And now you're going to D.C. What was that like? Was it?
It's very depressing. Life is just harder in a big city. And people who listen to this are probably going to want to argue with me about that. But, when you grow up in a little town or, even when I lived in Beaver, Walmart was 45 minutes away in Cedar City, but you drive to Cedar City, you park in the parking lot at Walmart, you go buy all the things you need and you walk out to your car. Here, there's not a Walmart anywhere nearby. And they're mostly tiny stores and you have to go to several different stores to get the things you need. And there's no parking. And it takes a lot more energy and brain power to survive in this kind of an urban environment. And I had never done it before. And driving here is a rodeo.
It is terrible.
There are no rules. You just have to do what you can get away with. And yeah, so I wouldn't say I settled in very well at first. Working out here, I was, in Utah probably about a quarter to a third of the time. And the happiest days for me were when I would get off a plane and get in a car and drive 80 miles an hour on the freeway. It just felt like the most freeing thing after sitting in traffic in the DC area.
So I've sort of had the same experience. While I grew up along the Wasatch Front, I started going to Washington, D.C. in 1992, and a lot's changed there in the last 30 plus years. But I had sort of that same reaction especially when I started spending a lot of time in the National Capital Region. And I think what's interesting is that still when I go there, I'm trying to find the paths along the river. I'm going out to Mount Vernon. I mean, my team just cracks up that they're like, you cannot be in the city long. You are always gravitating to what bit of nature there still exists in Northern Virginia. And
trying to find some open space.
Exactly. A good friend of mine told me last week, I was in Washington, D.C., in fact, and he and I had lunch, and he said, it's always been my dream to have a little brownstone house in the district. And he said, my wife and I finally bought this place. We sold our cars. We're living there full time. I said, that seems miserable to me. But I mean, you're right. I think a lot of your upbringing is in your DNA, and you should embrace it. And I'm so thankful that you told that story of how you ended up in D.C. So can I ask you a few questions about working for Congressman Stewart for as long as you did? You were there
about 4 years.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So, whoa, I mean, I would suspect that a lot of what came across your desk wasn't just land issues, natural resources, rural issues, but also with all of its national security council assignments that you were probably doing a lot of Department of Defense, national security type work as well. How was that?
Well, it's in a congressional office, you have an entire team, and the team is usually split up by subject matter areas, at least in Washington, D.C. So you have a Washington, D.C. part of the team, and then in the district part of the team. And with Congressman Stewart's office, I handled all of the public lands, natural resources, energy, water type issues. I was also the only attorney on the team. And so anything that needed a lawyer, I got to lawyer it. And so I saw some of the other issues. I was adjacent to the Intelligence Committee issues, and I worked on the Appropriations Committee. The other things he did, I staffed him on the Weaponization Committee that investigates, the federal government abusing its own citizens. But most of my time was spent on the kind of issues that I have a deep background in. I got enough exposure to all of the other things to know that it is a lot more fun to work in things you have a strong background in. But you can learn to do just about anything.
Absolutely. So you were there for 4 years, and then I'm sure you were shocked, like everybody else working with the congressman, that he's decided after a lot of hard work and getting reelected for the next. I mean, that was not. I mean, people look back on that and think, "Oh, yeah, that was an easy win for the congressman." It really wasn't. And our mutual friend Rhonda, I really give her so much credit for what she did in his last election to position him to make this work. And we get this call, "Hey, I'm going to go back to Utah and take care of my family." And my understanding was that no one had any indication of this. Really, all of the staff was surprised by it, and then but very supportive and understood a lot of the issues that he was going to back to Utah to address. But I mean, I'm sure you remember what that morning looked like. Maybe
I do.
describe that a bit.
Well, I can't speak for anyone else on the staff, but it was very much a surprise to me. We all knew that his wife had been having some health problems. He's very private about those things, and so I want to be careful what I say here too, because he is very
Sure.
private about those things. But I didn't know this was coming. It was a surprise to me.
Yeah.
And you know, as a staffer, we would joke all the time that you're only one bad day away from the unemployment line, and it's probably not your bad day. It becomes your bad day. But we lived it that day. And so everybody started making plans. What are we going to do next? But I also want to make sure I mention when we're talking about this that I feel really lucky to have worked for someone who could walk away. There's so many people who get here and they get into the cycle and they feel important and they just can't leave. I mean, if you look around, there are people who've been here their entire adult lives and they will probably die in office and they don't have anything, you know, anything else in their life worth walking away for. And the fact that Chris Stewart chose his family over this life is a testament to the kind of human being he is. And I don't know, I know a lot of people have given him a lot of respect for that, but I just don't know if people realize how rare that really is.
I
And
so appreciate you saying that about Chris, because I feel the same way. I knew Chris before he was a member. I've worked with him hand in hand on a lot of tough issues since he served in Congress, and he's still the same individual that went in all those years ago, and with a real desire to serve, and his ego never got in the way of him doing what was right. And I thank you for saying that. I admire him immensely.
yeah, it's a little disheartening how quickly people move on from what a great guy to, okay, he's gone now, what's next? And I just want to point that out every chance I get. The fact that he walked away because that's what was best for his family is a rare thing, and it's a pretty amazing thing. And that's why I was willing to work for him. You know, working in Washington, D.C. isn't easy. Working for Congress isn't easy. It'd be really tough to do for somebody you didn't respect, and I respect the heck out of him.
And I do too, and wish him all the best. I'm still in touch with him. I know you are as well. And just he was a unique member that has. I think there's a lot of the members that could learn a lot from Chris and his approach. So that day is sort of burned in my memory as well. I got a call from a mutual friend of ours and said, Chris is going to announce that he's resigning. I then get a call about 30 minutes later and had this impromptu meeting that everybody in the office, including Chris, was encouraging you to run for this special election. And while I had heard your name several times from Chris and Rhonda and you know, the staffers, Cam and Connor and whatnot, you and I had not worked together, but I said, and it was Tim Stewart that said, no, it's going to be Celeste. She's going to win this seat. I said, she's got no chance. I said, she's got no name recognition. No one, there is no way that and we were already hearing from, some of your opponents from last year that we're saying, great, we've been waiting for Chris to either get an appointment or announce he wasn't going to run. I was shocked at how many people that day were at the table saying, we're going after this, and sort of disappointed in this as well, frankly. But I kept saying to Tim, there is no way that Celeste is going to take this. It's a strange district. There's a lot of gradients all the way north to the very southern border of the state. And I watched this, and as you know, Rhonda and I are very close and have worked together for a lot of years. And she would give me the updates on what was happening with the campaign. And she said, I've never had the opportunity to work with somebody that is so adamant, committed, and will do anything that she asked you to do. She said, I've never worked with somebody that has worked so hard for a cause like this. And I mean, please talk to me about this campaign, because I watched it from the sidelines, and from the inside heard from Rhonda how, I mean, you were barely sleeping during that time. And
It's true.
what were your thoughts? What led to your decision to run? And then what was that campaign like?
Yeah, I'm happy to explain all that. First, I'll offer you the same deal I've offered a lot of people. I'll give you absolution on not believing I could do this. It was a long shot, and I know a lot of people didn't think it would work out. And now that I have been elected, I have these conversations a lot with people who feel like they have to apologize because early on they didn't think I had a shot. So I'm just, any of your listeners, I'm just going to give everyone absolution. No, nobody needs to apologize. I knew when I got in that I was taking a big risk. I never would have done it if Congressman Stewart hadn't encouraged me to. So it's another reason I really respect him and I'm really grateful. When he first told me he thought, excuse me, he thought I should run, I said no one would vote for me because everything I've done has been in your name. And I said they won't know all the things I've done. And he said, well, everyone in rural Utah knows you. And I think you'd be really surprised how people would react if you got out there and started talking about how much you know and how much you care. So I decided to give it a shot. And most people, I said already that most people have a hard time walking away. Most people also have a hard time really liking the person who replaces them. And Chris Stewart's been an absolute champion at encouraging me and cheering me on the entire way, for which I will always be grateful as well. So yeah, I decided to run for Congress, which is maybe the craziest thing I've ever done in my life. Maybe, I don't know. I'll have to take some inventory and decide. But I text my family. I mean, this all happened so fast. I found out that my boss was resigning. I knew I was going to have to come up with a new life plan and be flexible again, like we talked about. And then he talked to me about running, and I decided I wanted to do it. And it all happened in a matter of a few days. And so I sent a text to my family. I said, hey, before you hear it on the news, I think I'm going to run for Congress. And nobody even responded.
I love that. Like they thought they
a weird, like a stress reaction or some sort of midlife crisis. They're like, sure you are.
Oh my goodness. And then, wow. I mean, and like I said, I just saw, I mean, initially the amount of potential candidates that declared they were interested was huge, and including big names, the former Speaker of the House, and I mean, and your commitment to this and resolve that you were going to win was incredible.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I worked really hard, and my campaign worked really hard. I didn't have a paid campaign. By the end, there was one person that we were paying to work full time, but I had a campaign run by volunteers, and we worked around the clock. We worked every day of the week. On Sundays, we took it off, but even on Sundays, people would be sending me emails. They'd be getting things organized, and it is really humbling to watch people work that hard to help you accomplish a goal. And I knew early on that I was never going to be able to pay people back for all of the volunteer work they do. And it isn't about paying people back really, but you spend most of your life, if people help you out, you want to be able to be there for them. And I realized early on that I was in the kind of debt to these people that I would never be able to repay them. I had people who drove with me on 20-hour days, and, people who way past their bedtime were burning the midnight oil and helping me put the final touches on things. And I was working really, really hard, but I was working on my own goals, my own future. I had people who were working every bit as hard as I was, and they weren't asking for anything out of it. They weren't going to be a member of Congress at the end of it. They weren't going to be working for me. They weren't going to have any sort of, benefit to themselves. And having people believe in you that much is actually a little bit terrifying. And nobody tells you this. There are things. I've been around politics. I've been working for a politician. I'd gone through election cycles. I thought I knew what it was like. But when it's you, it is just an entirely different game. And the things that people can't explain to you until you're there are things like on the primary election night, well, that day before numbers started coming in, I mean, we didn't know how it was going to turn out. I felt pretty good. I felt pretty calm. I knew I had given it everything I had. But what I spent that day thinking about is I can't let all these people down who believed in me. And I recognize that there were 3 of us in that primary, and only one of us walked away as, the nominee. And I'm sure the other 2 were feeling the same thing. There are people who just show up and they work for you and they believe in you and they write you checks, and there's no way you can ever repay those people. And the only way I had to make this right with them, I guess, was to win. And so you spend that whole day hoping you don't let all the people down who believed in you. And that's a feeling that it's hard to describe and nobody had warned me about. But it makes it that much sweeter. When they called that race, I felt like I had done a favor for all the people who believed in me by proving them right. And that is a really, really good feeling that nobody can describe to you until you're the one in the hot seat. So I feel like we ran a really great campaign. We worked hard. We were on the road all the time. I was everywhere. I wanted to make sure that people in my district knew that I wanted to really represent the whole district. And I talked about it a lot, but talking about it doesn't do any good unless you show by your actions that you mean it. And so I was on the road all the time. I was showing up everywhere at everything and trying to talk to as many people as I could. And I think that is the best way to run for office, but it is not the easiest way to run for office.
Oh, it's hard work, and it's taxing on every element of your life. And I really feel like over the course of my career, while we've done so many different things, really what has fascinated me in the work we've done is how do you position a company or an individual to win at anything. And that psychology of winning, what you just described, that you were not going to give up. You were going to work as hard as you did, and you knew in your heart that you were going to win, is something that is so difficult to teach and train somebody. This is how you win at anything. And I love that you are able to capture that history and of this campaign. And it is really such a remarkable story that, and I'm so proud of you for what you've did last year. I mean, unfortunately, you've got another campaign. I mean, you never rested. You're already back in it. You knew that.
The week of Christmas. I did get to rest at Christmas, and now I'm running a campaign again.
I mean, you knew that going in. You knew the rules, but I don't know. Maybe there's with this momentum that you built up last year, and that it's like somebody that trains for a marathon and just keeps racing. Every week I'm going to do another marathon there, versus somebody coming off the couch trying. I've got this plan to run for a marathon. Maybe this momentum will continue, and will be clearly it'll be an advantage for you being the incumbent.
That's what I'm hoping. I came in last time with very low name ID and $0. This time I have some dollars in the bank. I have
Yes.
billboards up and down the district. I have my face on the side of haystacks up and down the district. I'm just not as much of an unknown as I was last time. And so I'm hoping that I can take some of that energy and momentum that I built up last time and just keep pushing through with the same message. My message really is, I want everyone in Utah's second congressional district to know who represents them, to know how to get a hold of me, and to know that I care about the things that are happening in their town. And this time I have to do it while I'm doing a full-time job. But the beautiful thing is, what I need to do in my full-time job is make sure that people in the second district know who I am, how to get a hold of me, and that I care about the things that are happening in their town. So I'm just going to keep applying that same optimism and work ethic and hope for the same outcome.
Well, I think it's exciting, and then I really had intended to talk about a lot of your policy, which, and can I commend you that your campaign was all about policy and it wasn't about all the nonsense. And I really admired how you built your strategy around pure policy and the things that you
Thank
talked
you.
about when we opened this up of, the needs of rural America, the needs of,
Mhm.
and the challenges that are faced with the farmers and ranchers and conservation and your background, and also inevitably small business, as most of these
Yeah.
families are small. I mean, we forget about they are small businesses.
Yeah. And
They,
I'm on the small business committee,
which I'm
which gives me an
excited about that.
opportunity to do good work for Utah. I've already had really good experiences in hearings where, people in Washington, D.C. are well aware that Utah is an entrepreneurial state and that we really support our small businesses in Utah. And serving on that committee, it wasn't my first choice. I talked a lot in the first campaign about how I wanted to be on natural resources and I wanted to be on House Armed Services. When I got here, there weren't openings on either one of those
Yep.
committees. So I told leadership, put me wherever you need me the most. They put me on small business and they put me on transportation and infrastructure. And those are both great committees for Utah.
Those are
It's
A
easy.
committees.
Yeah. And I don't even have to try to draw a line between what I'm doing on committee and what matters to Utahns because it's just so natural and easy. And I'm really excited about that too. And I have a policy in my office and on my team that we don't walk into a hearing, we don't introduce a bill, we don't introduce a letter until we've talked to people in the district who will be impacted by it and gotten their feedback. And, I'm still new. I just hit my 2-month mark yesterday. So I'm 2 months and one day into this job, but I've already seen how much it matters to people in Utah that they're being looped in. We're pulling them in and asking for their thoughts and what they need instead of just doing the committee work and assuming that we know what people need. And I want to keep doing that. I think it's a winning formula. It's something that I hope sets a new standard, sets a higher bar for representation. That when you're representing people, I view that as kind of a sacred trust that I'm here speaking on behalf of people in Utah Second District. So I want to hear from as many people in Utah Second District as I can. And I want to really understand how the decisions I'm making impact their day-to-day lives. And that's why we ran such a policy-driven campaign, because if we can get the policy right, we can make people in Utah's lives easier, and make it so they don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about what's happening in Washington, D.C. or what Congress does. I find it discouraging that everybody has sort of a PhD right now in what's happening in Congress, because if we were doing our jobs right, we'd be a little bit invisible.
Well, and I think the opposite. So like you, over the last year, I have personally visited hundreds of small towns across the West, not just in Utah, but in every state west of Texas. And unfortunately, there is not a good understanding even along the Wasatch Front, but particularly in Washington, D.C., of the chemistry of these small towns and the challenges that they're facing, the frustrations that they have with policy and their representatives. And, we run an organization that was started by General Eisenhower before he was president. A unique organization. He said in a speech when he formed this organization that was right after the war, and he said, there will come a time when America will forget about this war and this generation will die off, and we cannot let that happen. He said, at the turn of the 20th century, people came off the farms and into the cities, and they forgot where they came from and the roots of this country. And he said, that's going to happen with national security. And I've always remembered that speech that he gave when he formed this organization around national security. Sadly, we have forgotten as a country that so much of America is rural. And I look what's happened in Colorado, our little brother now, that what's happened in Denver along, what they call the Front Range, and versus what's going on in rural Colorado. And in every state in the West, we're seeing that, where there is policy being made in these urban areas, and there's this misunderstanding really of what is happening in rural America. I think Utah is in a unique position. I have jokingly said, hey, we've got this rural renaissance in Utah with Governor Cox and Celeste and a lot of the members of the legislature serving in leadership positions that are from rural areas and really understand this. I think we've done this better in the state of Utah than in Colorado, but I am so enamored with your unique subject matter expertise and understanding of rural Utah and the need for jobs, economic development, education, and services that is all policy-based.
Yeah, it is unique, and that's a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing that it's unique. If one thing I've already learned being in Congress is that there are a lot of different backgrounds here. And in some ways, the United States House of Representatives is just a cross-section of America. And I think that's a good thing. So some of my colleagues are, retired special forces, and some of them are retired school teachers. And some of them have PhDs from Ivy League universities, and some of them didn't finish high school. And that gives us an ability to represent America in the right way. So when I sit in conference and listen to my Republican colleagues debate the pros and cons of a bill. So today I sat and listened to some of my colleagues from southern states and some of my colleagues from New York City talking about, this part of this bill will be bad for my constituents in New York. Well, if I do what's good for your constituents in New York, my constituents in Florida are going to be really upset. And that's what we're supposed to be doing here. That's part of the process. That's how the sausage is made, so to speak. And so if we had a bunch of people here who all came from the same kind of family and the same kind of town and the same kind of education, we wouldn't do a very good job of representing the people of the United States of America. But the fact that I have a different perspective than most of my colleagues and that they mostly have different perspectives from each other is a really beautiful thing. I would say that it's what makes Congress work, except we're not working at the moment. A one vote majority does not help Congress work. But having different perspectives means we come up with better bills. We come up with better ideas. The ideas have a more realistic chance of helping more Americans when the people who are debating the ideas have unique perspectives. So, I'm going to keep touting my unique perspective, but I'm glad that Congress isn't full of people just like me.
Absolutely. Well, we got to very few of the policy questions that I have for you, and maybe we could do another round. And especially, I want to talk about some of the things you're doing in small business on the committee, which is fascinating, and I really think align with your overall platform. For the last 20 years, we've worked with the Small Business Administration and also with the Department of Commerce, creating regional innovation clusters. And one of the things that I've asked both the committee, the House and Senate committees, and also the department at the agency level is that while these vertical innovation clusters have worked across the United States in primarily urban areas, we need to focus on rural issues and particularly agriculture. And I think we've got the leadership of the Department of Commerce and the SBA to let us build a pilot initiative around job creation specific to rural America and agriculture. So I'd love to circle back with you on that topic at some point.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to do another podcast.
I would love it. And we will link all of your contact information. You've got our full support throughout LSI, and we're excited for you to start your second term. And I mean, it's funny to say that after it just feels like 2 months and in the Congress, and we're already talking about your second election. But can I ask you one last question before we wrap up? What do you do for fun and that's not policy driven? Is there something that you do to unwind after you've been on the floor all day?
Yeah, I'm going to have to figure that part out. I've gotten really good advice from several people that I really respect that I need to have some things in my life that help me unwind. So far, I am trying to build a team and get everything running and run a re-election. And I haven't really figured out my unwinding piece, except that I spend a lot of time on airplanes. And right now I try not to do a lot of work on an airplane. When I'm on the airplane, I sort of let my brain rest for a little bit. I sleep a little bit. I'll listen to books. I read books. Sometimes I just play, the games they have on Delta on the back of the seat in front of you. That's when I give myself permission to just unplug a little bit. And because I spend so much time on airplanes, that's actually probably a pretty good percentage of my time.
I love it.
It's as much as I sleep, I think.
That's amazing. Yes, you need a hobby.
I do.
Congresswoman Maloy, thank you so much for carving this time out. And I really appreciate what you're doing and excited to be working with you. And you've got a remarkable story, and we're here to help you with whatever that is that you need to accomplish here in the state and also in the House. And look forward to these upcoming months. It's going to be exciting.
Thank you. I appreciate that offer. I'm going to take you up on that offer to help. There are a lot of things I'm going to have to become an expert on in the next few months that you already have some expertise in. And I think that is another thing that makes the House work when members of Congress have people that they can go to.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I'll let you get back to your work in D.C. and look forward to connecting with you in the near future.
Okay, thanks.
Take
care. Have a good one.
See ya.
Bye.